Hey everybody, this is Sean Robinson.
I'm Carson Grubaugh, and welcome to Living the Line and Free
today,
the People.
Now continuing our previous conversation with a different energy level. Will they let Logan talk? Will Sean talk about the loom for 15 minutes?
I feel like Logan's talked too much. Yeah,
definitely, I've talked too much.
We've been having a conversation with the gentleman from Free the People, and we have been really enjoying ourselves. And this is the second part of that conversation. So before you listen to this, I think you should probably pop on over to Free the People, take a look at the link right below me, and watch the first half of our conversation, in which Carson and I bloviate at great length about all of our favorite philosophical topics in the guise of tearing down the ugly face of the AI revolution. So with us today, our founder of Free the People, Matt Kibbe. How you doing, Matt?
Hey, I'm doing great.
And the editor and filmographer, soon to be replaced by a robot, Mr. Matt Battaglia. How are you?
Great.
And our central antagonist, musician, writer, man of all trades, soon to also be replaced by several robots simultaneously, Mr. Logan Albright. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing great. It's nice to be here with you guys.
Logan actually is a robot. Yeah. That's how good the technology is.
So, Logan,
he seems like a person.
Since you guys let us sell our products, you've got a book back there that I've been looking at, and the title keeps drawing me in. So can you tell us about libertarian paganism?
Yes. So I have a new book coming out. It's not coming out until October, so it's still a ways away, but it's called Libertarian Paganism, Freedom and Responsibility in Nature-Based Religions. And it's basically I tried to find the two smallest audiences I could possibly find. It's the idea is that I identify as a pagan myself and a libertarian, and I find that these two philosophies have a lot of things in common that people don't talk about. And so I thought I'd be the first person to write about this and show that, more libertarians should be pagans and more pagans should be libertarians. It's pretty cool. It's being published by Moon Books. It's available for pre-order from their website now. It's not yet on Amazon, but it should be within the next couple months.
By the way, the Venn diagram of those two communities is very tiny. You have to look very closely.
Well, I'm trying to expand it. That's my goal.
And the overlay is it's a niche market, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think he's actually got the right answer, which is why I keep looking at it. It goes back to the rant video I did the other day, and the answer to everything we've been worried about is personal responsibility, right? And that's toward the environment and your environment. So I'm looking at that title and like, that looks right. It's got trees all over the cover, which is my new thing. So.
I like trees.
By the way, this is convincing me that we should just have been doing this the entire time in the previous
holding it up.
video.
Well,
Logan set up. He knew he had a book and he's ready. He set his setup correctly.
Well, no, it's a fantastic topic too. I mean, I'm getting frisson just by hearing your topic sentence. So when you said that title, I was immediately getting sparks. I think it's fantastic. We should say to the viewers of our channel, because we don't particularly talk politics, and it was interesting, at kind of navigating like Matt's book, Matt Battaglia, cartoonist.
Speaking of books that are coming out,
right?
March from Living in the Line. In March. It was interesting because when I read it, it occurred to me that this is a topic that could be seen as political, but he doesn't approach it in a political way. And I think that oftentimes people have a sort of ignorant opinion, first blush opinion about the idea of libertarianism, as if it's some type of third party or spoilers or whatever it is that they think about it. But it's funny, like when you think about all of the you can kind of have a knee-jerk reaction in the same way that like people have a knee-jerk reaction if I say that I draw comics. Somebody might be like, well, I got this Superman book for you. That like the actual content is so disconnected from it. But that's definitely one of the things that's intriguing to me about your title there. You're kind of giving lie to the sort of knee-jerk reaction that somebody might have to the idea of libertarianism as a particular political set of views as opposed to a philosophical positioning.
It's so the way I describe it, and this is we at Free the People, we really try to find stories that get people to think about these things. But a libertarian at our core, we think that people should be free to live their lives and pursue their dreams as long as they don't hurt other people or take their stuff. And that leaves a lot of running room for a lot of different pursuits and a lot of different values and a lot of different choices. And I think that those differences, when we're not hurting people or taking their stuff, leads to things that are quite beautiful, all sorts of collaborations and communities. And I was making fun of Logan's Venn diagram, but I think that fringe, and I'll use it in a positive way instead of a negative way, is a very beautiful thing, because we learn so much from people who are different from us. And we were talking earlier about how social media alienates us and pits us against each other and creates caricatures of who we are. Our idea of how the world should work is one of sort of empathy and understanding for people who are different, because we're curious. We're like, oh, this person has a different perspective on things. I know that they're not going to hurt me or take my stuff, so let's engage and see if we can't do something cool together. It sounds kind of utopian, but that in its essence, that's kind of how people do cooperate. They sort of suspend their suspicions and their cautions and try to find ways to work together. And to me, that's what community is all about. And community is a beautiful thing.
And you're not positing like communism or collectivism either, which is interesting. You're positing a relationship between the two.
Yeah.
I take it that's the core of the libertarian thing, which I think is exactly the right answer, because the communist or the collectivist would want to legislate proper behavior towards others. You guys philosophically, and I guess I would consider myself a libertarian on those lines as well, you're just saying, well, it's the individual's responsibility to act responsibly towards the collective and the other, but don't you dare legislate that, because that's very scary.
Yeah, legislating it destroys everything.
The way I like to define libertarianism in one sentence, or at least the way I think about it, is it's better for human interaction to be voluntary rather than coerced. So we should try to maximize the amount of voluntary interaction and minimize the amount of coercive interaction. That's kind of how I look at it.
But that comes with a massive amount of responsibility. Like I grew up in California, which is the collectivist nightmare gone wrong currently. And now I moved to Alabama, which individualism here is too far, and so like you can't even drive down the street because people will drive whatever fucking way they want, and there's no sense of personal responsibility towards the others. And so like that's the thing that I'm starting to realize is you're gonna always get the temptation towards the legislation unless people get their shit together and act responsibly.
Right. And speaking of acting responsibly, if you guys didn't watch that first video, you don't know that we're going to be talking about AI image generation today.
Not politics on the comic channel.
Right. And that was your personal decision. Like, you guys fucked it up. Okay. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to step in. I'm the nanny state. Okay. And I'm going to tell you now, if you don't want to watch the video, that's fine. But this is going to be a conversation about AI. And I think that there's a lot of room for the perspective of like, I'm just going to jump into the knee-jerk reaction that people have had over the past 7 months as people have realized, oh man, this thing is coming. Oh man, this thing is going to supplant me. Oh man, this thing paints better than I do. There's been this knee-jerk response to want to demonize it and shout it down instead of engage with it. And it's some of it might be driven by the imagery itself. I had people viscerally react to this, like seeing this, like, what is this thing? And I totally understand that. But there's a certain impulse to like shout it down as if we can make it go away if we're loud enough. I mean, what do you have like a Matt, what's your knee-jerk reaction to that?
Which Matt?
Impulse?
Which Matt?
Kibbe, sorry.
My knee-jerk reaction is that, and this applies to technology, not just in art, but in everything. I think I think we're in a middle of a pretty fundamental paradigm shift, a revolution. And I could talk about the upsides, like there's everything is more democratized, and in some ways everything is being pushed to the end user. So I, who have no artistic bones in my body, can apparently type in a prompt and press a button.
No, you can't.
And
you can't figure this out.
Yeah, because I'm a technological idiot. But this is you creative types. This is your fear, is that an idiot like me is going to take over. But I think and this would be sort of the libertarian white pill argument. We're in the process of this chaotic transition from the old way of doing things that was more top down to a new way of doing things that is more bottom up. And I think we'll figure it out. And I would be always skeptical of criticizing innovation, but all innovation is subject to humans following rules and figuring out ways that are sort of respectful and cooperative, and that, I think, is sort of the dystopian view of this, is that we're all going to end up in the Matrix and it's going to really suck, and we're not going to have any real art again. I don't think real creative human art ever is replaced by a machine.
Well, I think the physical thing is what's important now. I think that small anecdote, but like I did a watercolor. We do like a Christmas grab bag with my in-laws, and I did a watercolor for the grab bag, and it was like, it was well liked because it's a physical, like, actual thing, and I wrote one of one because I was thinking about the AI, because I had just done the AI, the art challenge, the contest that you guys did with the AI. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I had just done that, and I was in a dark place, and I was one of one because, but I think the physical is way more important again. And I know Sean thinks that is all about this.
Well, I think that's definitely one of the two strands that I see that people can take and run. And, Kibbe, you were talking about the Grateful Dead as performers in our prior conversation. And I think that is the other strand that can possibly, come to the fore. And I used to actually emphasize both of these things because I used to be part of a scene in Seattle that was filled with lots of incredible cartoonists, people who just, blew me out of the water. And it was just a pleasure to just sit next to a genius like Jim Woodring and watch him draw, or people who you guys don't even know because they never published, people like Billis Helg, who could just draw directly in ink, and it's just like his line has this organic flowing quality. And I used to play shows with my band, and I wanted to incorporate these people into it. And so I begged these people, will you please do some stunt drawing, is what I'd call it. And they would go and they would draw while my band was performing. They would draw large scale stuff, and whatever they made during that time, that was sold off at the end of the show. And we did this several times, and there's a visceral reaction that people have to the physical object, to seeing it be created in front of them. And the thing is that either of those two strands, the sort of emphasizing the physical as a way of distancing it from the machine, or emphasizing the performance, those are not going to be palatable to everybody, especially people who are more withdrawn, people who want to create privately, people who feel like they can't kind of engage in that kind of way. And so you are going to have people who are just totally left behind by that. But I think that those are two strands. Maybe, Logan, you have some other ideas of different ways that somebody could move ahead. I mean, how do you differentiate yourself in a sea of images?
Yeah, that's a great point. When we left off the previous conversation on the Free the People channel, Sean was talking about how recorded music had destroyed the music industry forever because the ability to listen to a recording of Pavarotti means that there's less demand for opera singers in general, which is a totally fair point. But although as someone who went to college with a bunch of opera singers, I'm not sure that fewer opera singers in the world is a net negative. But I think that's only half the story, right? There's also the consumer half, whereas everybody gets to hear Pavarotti. my favorite composer is the Hungarian composer Franz Liszt, and one of the greatest piano virtuosos of all time. And what he used to do in his day was travel around Europe to towns that were too small to have their own symphony orchestra and play piano arrangements of Beethoven symphonies, because he wanted everyone to hear Beethoven. And now you don't need to do that because everybody can hear a recording of Beethoven for basically free almost. And I want to live in a world where people can hear Beethoven if they need to. I think that's a better world to live in. And it may have a cost to certain, jobs or certain creators, but I think that the net result of giving people more access to beauty, more access to art is a better thing overall. And I like I've said before, I think we don't know what the future is going to look like. That's the beautiful thing about humanity, is like you never know what people are going to come up with. And so I have faith in humanity, and based on my knowledge of history and the way these things have run before, that whenever a new technology comes out to supplant some industry that we're working in, people always find new ways to adapt and come up with new things to do to create more value for each other and find meaning in the world. It's always happened in the past. It's possible that it won't happen this time, but I haven't been convinced that this is a unique situation that's going to be different than every other previous time.
Well, but the basic argument that you're saying, in terms of if we can take apart Beethoven for a second, is
Sure.
that people have benefited from hearing the full symphonic scope of the Beethoven symphonies in their wherever they want, in their car or at their desk or whatever. You could easily make the argument, though, that if that has caused less people to play that music, personally play that music, that there might still be a net negative. Because when you are the person who is performing, when you're the person who has enriched your own life, you have made your life more meaningful by picking up those skills, by developing those skills, by performing for another human being, by being direct connection to them. I'm at an advantage in this argument in that I was a street performer for several years and I played without the benefit of amplification. And I can tell you that it's a electric experience to have a one-on-one human interaction when you are delivering what you're physically capable of doing directly to another human being. And that is an experience that almost nobody gets to have. And yet that was the norm for musicians for hundreds, possibly thousands of years.
Yeah, and that experience can't be taken away by computers or machines.
Not for me. I'm very fortunate that I had saved up enough money and had lived in a middle-class life that enabled me to go to school that taught me how to play the flute. And
I think Sean's
leisure
concern, Sean, your concern is more with the disincentivization of learning the skill.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm actually in the middle of all of this, right? I know I'm making some extreme, like, in-state Armageddon arguments because I think the logical conclusion of it is something we should worry about. Whether we'll ever get there or not, or how soon, is, of course, we won't know till we get there. But it's foolish not to keep an eye on that. I think the more important thing, though, is that we actually look at the real problems that we're facing right now because of the tech that exists. And one of them is the disincentivization of skill gaining. And this is 100% a very real problem. Now, society may turn into something else. We just don't know what it is. But that's why we need to have the conversation, because we can't just let it happen. We need to steer it. And that's especially in education right now. This stuff is having a massive impact. Like, I probably, I'm just 2.5 years into my career job. So I got another 20 some odd years to go. I don't think that art programs will be the same thing in 20 years. And we need to rethink what that is, what we're teaching them, what skill set. This is going to extend even more. It already, as of, a month ago, the education system has no idea what to do about ChatGPT. I talked to my colleagues in the English department. I said, are you aware that this is even a thing? You need to know. And yeah, I just saw it last week. And I generated an essay and I put it into our plagiarism catching devices, and it can't catch it because it's not bashing essays together in a way that it can find the chunk that's stolen. they've already passed, the Chat GPT has passed like with the B+, like some big law exam or something like that.
It got an MBA.
So, yeah, there's a couple instances where it's achieved significant academic things. So a very real world problem is what is education? Like, is like what I talked to my English colleagues and I said, what are you going to do? Like, you just have to have them write all their essays in person by hand now? Then you're limited to an essay that can be written in an hour? Or do you start having to have, like, every time you have a test, it's like a 6, 7, 8 hour test for a handwritten essay? That's a problem that's 100% real. It's 100% here. And that has a disincentivization to get better. So you're potentially getting more and more and more and more of the population that's less and less and less and less educated, facilitating cheating and stuff. So what do? Do we rearrange, do we let that happen? Or do we have to rearrange education so that it's about something it's never been about before, which is how to navigate a world where you don't need the technical skills, you just need to be able to navigate putting the information together, and that's, I think it's not an unsolvable problem, and I agree with you on that, Logan. We'll find a way, but it's restructuring human society in a way that it hasn't been restructured since Plato and the initiation of the academy. Like, the academy needs to become something new. So it's not apocalyptic, but it's as big as it gets.
Well, I think it's perhaps a revelation, and Logan has very strong opinions about this that I agree with, but perhaps education has become way too formulaic, where people are learning to pass a test to get a credential that gives them legitimacy in the job market, instead of going to school to learn how to think and create and do the things that a classical education used to teach you to do. And maybe that's the downside of the democratization of education, because it's become a caricature of what it was meant to be. So if you're going to college and you're just going to plug it into an AI and turn in that essay, you will get absolutely nothing out of college except perhaps a diploma that means nothing.
I would have drank more.
Yeah, that and a degree. Yeah, and you're right. Like the I don't want to say democratization, but the socialization of education. Everyone gets a free education. Of course, that inherently devalues the education, because that means you need significantly more teachers, and significantly more teachers means the competency of each individual teacher on the average is going to go down. So there's still a battle for resources of the most competent teachers. Just because it's a free education doesn't mean you're getting the best education.
And you're also shoehorning all students. You're assuming they want the same thing out of an
it's a massive
education,
problem.
and perhaps we would be better off to let students choose different paths.
I'm a little bit of a contrarian, in case you haven't been able to tell by their conversation so far. And I love challenging kind of assumptions that people have in society. It's one of my favorite things. And this whole discussion about the testing is really interesting to me, because I think, for the longest time we've taken it for granted that the way you do education is the students have to listen to a lecture and then write a paper to prove that they were listening to the lecture. And ChatGPT is going to make that impossible to do. And so that means we have to come up with something else. And I don't think it's at all obvious that that's the best way to educate people. And I think, we could learn a lot about how education works and how we can improve education by having to innovate around this problem. And I think that's really exciting and has a lot of possibilities.
I agree, 100%.
It seems like to take it back into the image generation world. I think that this is actually possibly, in an academic standpoint, this might actually enrich in the short term the art education side, because you might be very incentivized to make it 100% skills based in a way that was kind of drained out, especially in the 70s. I have an art education background. I taught high school for 5 years, and in the 70s especially was a time when personal expression became the byword, and the idea that you were going to teach personal expression, and so art was seen as a kind of
therapeutic experience, which obviously it can be, and that's part of the virtue that it has, is like we've been talking about, the meaning making. But at the consequence, as an educator, they leached out lots of components of the actual education, which is, can you draw the damn donkey? Make a donkey that looks like a donkey. How do you do that? How do you make the donkey, teach? Like a lot of the classes that I had in college, I was like struggling, like, hey, can you show me how to make the donkey? Are we going to get to that part? And I could see a potential pushback in which the physical skill itself is the thing that's being reinforced, as opposed to the chat GPT, like you're saying. If the expectation is that you do the work outside of the room, or that you deliver it digitally or whatever, obviously that's a totally different experience. But if it goes back, I mean, there is something, I guess I'm trying to launch an argument in favor of craft, something that we use as a pejorative a lot. But is in reality where a tremendous amount of the satisfaction comes from, a personal satisfaction that an artist goes through to do it. Not just learning the craft, but also figuring out which elements of the craft give them that kind of friction that makes them want to be the crazy person who's chained to their desk for 15 hours a day.
I want to go to something that, tagging onto this, but also to Carson's video about the, what's his, oh crap, I love his art. You just did it, the Tree of Life thing, the Land of the Dead book, right?
The Toby Cypress,
yeah.
Brian McDonald book. That was.
Remind me, I have to dig out. I have a couple Toby Cypress originals somewhere in here.
Ooh.
Yeah. But something that, and with the skills, right? Carson was talking about meaning and how, like, all that stuff, but like the need to learn like trades and craft is so much more important today, especially you consider the way the economy is and the costs and things. I mean, I had a problem with my car, right? And to pay someone to fix it is thousands of dollars, and then you realize, okay, you've got access to all these materials on now where you can actually, and to Kibby's point, the democratization of certain levels of knowledge, where shit, you wanted to fix your car, like, I don't actually have to go to a mechanic for some things. I can just go Google it and figure this out. Same with like the art stuff now, where it's like, I didn't get anything out of my college art programs. There was no skills-based stuff. I took one life drawing class at the Kubert School at night and got way more out of that than I ever did in any sort of theory art class that I took at Rutgers. And I learned more about video making by working in the field than I did at Rutgers either, because it was all theory. It was all, make your BS art piece. They didn't teach you how to use the camera.
Well, the problem that Sean was describing, and I do see and Logan, you're 100% right. This stuff is forcing us to rethink education, and Kibbe, you're right as well. We're being forced to rethink education, and a lot of the talk about pedagogy right now is much more about formative experiences rather than summative experiences where you just go take a test and you spit out back what you learn. But there has been a huge attack on critical thinking too, right? Like there's a certain kind of thing that they want you to think, and if you're not thinking that, you're not doing critical thinking. So it's a problem, and part of that is what Sean's describing is a decoupling of skill and critical thinking. And a really, really good teacher understands that teaching the skill, and this is my primary 100% goal, especially when I teach drawing, I don't give a shit about the end result of the drawing. The end result of the drawing is just proof to me that they understand the critical thinking skill about visual perception that I'm trying to teach them. And so, yeah, education disconnected those two at some point, and that is philosophy's fault, and it's the art world's fault. Like that started with Marcel Duchamp, and that started going back to Logan's argument from the previous video. That started with the camera, where you could have the in-state conceptual result, and yeah, photography had to learn its own skill, but it made the in-state result, and then that led to concept art, performative art, and all that kind of stuff, which is entirely conceptual with no skill needed. That's 1960s. You get the conceptual artists, Yoko Ono, John Baldessari, Solowit, and all of these people. And then that took over in the 70s. And those people couldn't teach Sean what he wanted to know because they didn't know how to do it.
Right.
I do think education is coming back, or at least those of us who really care, we understand you have to recouple skill, and that the skill is how you learn the critical thinking. And so I think part of Sean's worry is as AI disincentivizes the skill building, it gets harder to actually teach the critical thinking. So we need to reevaluate how to teach critical thinking in a world where kids don't want anything to do with the tough skill building part of it, you know, like where the hard stuff is so easy to skip over. How do we reestablish that?
Tell us, Kimmy, you know the answer. I know you know the answer.
So I'm gonna tell a jazz story, and maybe this is relevant and maybe it's not, but one of my favorite players is John Coltrane, who was infamously kicked out of Miles Davis quintet because he was breaking the rules of jazz. Miles was a classically trained jazz player, so he had to learn the rules in order to break the rules. Coltrane was not classically trained, so he perhaps picked up the rules along the way. I think that there's two different ways to learn the skill set to break the rules, but the point of the story is the whole point of learning the skills is your ability to sort of innovate and break the rules in the process of doing that. And it's ironic that Miles kicked John Coltrane out of the group because his solos were too long. Because Miles would later do Bitches Brew and be accused by jazz elitists as destroying jazz music. So to me, that whole process is not something that's planned or taught. It's something that is built into the creative human personality. You do it because you can't not do it. And it's Sean, it's that thing you were talking about earlier, performing live without a microphone in front of a live audience. There is nothing like that. You won't learn it in college, and someone can't just give it to you. You got to go out and get it. And I think that's a human thing. And I realize that not all humans pursue that at that level, but we all need a sense of creation. We all need a sense of connection with other people, and cheating and sliding your way through college and just using AI as a substitute for that process. I don't think it's human. So this is why I and Logan, we're not that worried about how this is going to turn out, because I think people need that. And I don't think if they're not getting it from school, they'll get it somewhere else, and it's all going to be okay.
Well, the thing I worry about from like the evidence of being a teacher is it's the rare individual who actually seeks it out. Most of them want to slide by and do the least amount. And the more and more tools they have for that, I think the fear is, and I think Sean's way more convinced, you know, that it's here and coming, and I'm just like, it's a fear, it's something we need to address, is that the technology incentivizes more and more and more people to just check out and be the slugs in Wall-E that are just sipping their juice and, you know, floating on chairs. And, you know, but also, like, I think the core of this argument comes down to, so what? Is that a bad thing? Like, you know, does the species need to persist if those people choose to check themselves out? I mean, is that a bad thing?
Let me take it back into the libertarian thread here, Carson, because your experience with the students who want to slide by. I mean, how much of that is because it's compulsory? And yeah, you can say, okay, well, Carson teaches at a community college; it's not compulsory. Well, I mean, let's be frank.
It is.
It is compulsory to go to college if you expect to have a job, other than the lowest of the
No, that's not true, because my brother never went to school, and he's a structural welder, and he makes more money than I do, I'm sure. But
he is, and that is a fantastic example of the very small little pockets that still exist, the trade options that are still there. But those those are also still going away. The more kind of regulation that we build up, the regulatory framework encourages people to take the compulsory, to see those steps as compulsory. And you know, you really want to see compulsory. You go to a high school, the high school that I taught for 5 years, and you go into the math classes, which my poor colleagues who taught math, I would occasionally go in there and, crack a couple jokes and then say hi to some of the kids and then leave. I had the least compulsory class, because I would just tell the kids, I would just say, seems like you don't want to be here. Would you like help getting into a baseball class? Would you like help for team sports? I will help you. It's not compulsory for me. You can leave. Like, let's get you out of here. It's okay. But I think that attitude comes with being told that you have to do it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is.
You are speaking Logan's language there.
I should tell the audience, maybe part of my perspective on this comes from the fact that I was homeschooled as a child, and so I was never forced to learn anything that I didn't want to learn. And I was always completely thirsty for knowledge and wanting to develop new skills. And I totally agree with both of you guys. Learning a new skill is very rewarding and very meaningful, and putting in the hard work and doing something that's difficult for you is really important to your satisfaction and your self-worth as a human being. And I think, it is a problem if people don't want to do that anymore. And maybe we're going to have to learn to be more self-motivated in a sense. And maybe we're going to have to come up with a new way of navigating this and figuring out ways to be self-motivated. But I would also say that this is nothing new. We're maybe being disincentivized to paint or draw right now, but we've always been disincentivized to learn how to kill and gut a deer, or make our own clothing, or till a field. Every time we invent a new technology, we're disincentivizing people from learning that skill, and that's been going on for thousands of years. And I don't think you can say that that's uniformly a bad thing. It's just something we have to navigate and figure out a way around.
Well, and you do see a lot of these old skills coming back too. My wife and I bought an old house, and we've got a young guy who's helping us, with a couple of things. There's a small industry now. It's very niche, but hey, you bought an old house. Well, we specialize in making new things that are old, the old way for old houses. So it works how an old house is supposed to work. And the guy can't be older than, he's definitely younger than me. And so, think about records and stuff. They've come back in a way that they never. I'm apocalyptic about AI, but I also think that all these sort of anachronistic sort of ways of doing things, there's a charm to them that's never going to go away, and people are going to still hopefully want to keep doing them.
Well, the difference is whether it's going to be sold in a boutique or whether it's going to be something that anyone can have access to.
And that's the problem, isn't it?
And if you were depriving people of the engine of meaning, it is a disingenuous argument to compare human meaning-making activities to things that people felt forced to do for centuries. And even though I'm saying that, I think to myself, there are people who love to farm. Mm-hmm. There are people who love to till. That is just a fact. And so here I'm throwing them under the bus. Somebody in the comment section before, maybe he's listening now, compared drawing to elevator operating, and said that well, do you think that all the elevator operators were crying when they got the automated elevators? And well, you know what, man, there probably were some people who loved operating their elevator. Mm-hmm. They loved
because they got to talk to people.
Yeah,
and, there was a social component, a human component. I would like to dig in on meaning, though. I think that's the thing that we've avoided until now. Mm-hmm. And I think that's connected to, Logan, you made a very good point that the main problem, and I've been thinking about this for a while, I've heard a lot of people talking about meaning. I think that Jordan Peterson's the guy that, publicly has kind of solidified this idea of like, look, you have to choose an obligation and a responsibility to give meaning to your life. But I've never heard him or anyone else answer how you find that. And I've never, as a teacher, figured out how to teach motivation. It's like, look, you either get up and you do it or you don't. And I've pondered that for a long time because I see it in my students all the time. They don't know yet what that thing is that they can attach themselves to. And I think as a society, the biggest problem facing us, in the face of AI or not, just where society is at now, and I just cannot for the life of me think of the answer, is how you teach motivation. And I do think that's going to be part of the education system moving forward. And Kivy, you were talking about the Miles Davis thing and the Coltrane. Miles Davis provided a learning environment for Coltrane, whether it was formalized or not. And so a real good education is a place that gives that environment. And within that, I think maybe that's where motivation grows. But that is tied to meaning, generating that meaning. What do we find meaningful? And so I'm curious for everybody here, what you mean by meaning. Just if we could go like,
well, I like the example that Sean used, and I'm not a musician, but I'm a writer, and I'm someone that has been a bit of a chameleon in my career. I'm trained as an economist, but most of what I've done in my career had very little to do, perhaps, with my formal training, and I get meaning out of pushing myself out of my comfort zone and doing things that I don't particularly know how to do. And what's interesting about that is I suspect everyone here has had this experience where you take on a project, whatever it is, maybe it's giving a speech, and you suck at public speaking, and you got to go out there and you got to perform. There's nothing feels better than walking off stage saying, I nailed that. And by the way, you don't normally feel that way. You normally are self-critical and you're like, wow, that sucked. I should have done this. I should have done that. But the reason you do it is you want that feeling that you nailed it. And that feeling doesn't stick around. Like, that's not the end of the process. Like, it's a never ending process of pursuing things. And to me, I call it work. Like, it's hard work, and real work is very uncomfortable. Real work is forcing yourself to do things that you don't know how to do. I think that's where we get meaning. And this is, by the way, why I'm optimistic about this idea that AI is not going to destroy art as we know it, because I think that pursuit of meaning is far more fundamental to the human experience than the urge to slide by. Everybody, we've all slidden by, and we've all sort of cheated out of that process of achieving that good work, but you don't get anything out of that. And I think people need that, and it's going to be at different levels. Like, not everybody needs it at the same level, but that to me is part of what it means to be a human being.
Battaglia, what do you mean by meaning? I'm gonna be teacher now.
It's tough. I mean, I guess
reading my book House on Fire.
Yeah. No,
you must have felt that, right? You've completed this thing. I know you sweated over it. You're anxious about it. That process of creating that thing was very difficult, but you must have gotten something out of that process.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the process of creating anything, and be it documentaries that free the people, be it the House on Fire, like comics and things like that, is I'm usually trying to work something out. Generally, like in a way that I'm not well spoken often, so trying to communicate how I feel about a topic or the world or myself, and trying to put that into something even just for myself to understand, The last book the short book that I did that I used as introduction to Sean Carson Ghosts of Carousel was like, me trying to work out a lot of like old relationships and sort of death and loss and that kind of stuff. And sort of, I look at the actual product as a thing that, the completed thing, I can see all the flaws in it and I hate looking at it and etc. But the physical act of making it, that's the release. That's where I get some sort of understanding about where I am in life. But then there's also all the other, like, I think there's a lot to what you said, Kibby, about meaning being doing something that you don't know how to do. I feel like the more and more like that you grow as a person, the older you get, and the more things you run into, and the more things that you have to work out and figure out is where you get meaning. Like you're just always going to be running up against obstacles and problems. And I know that like the ChatGPT thing with the taking a test and being able to fake it. Well, like eventually there's a point in life where you can't just kind of BS your way through. And so I think it's in that realm is where you get the most meaning. And I don't even know if that defines meaning well. But I feel like doing things is where, and for me that's art usually. So, or fixing a boiler.
That also gives you heat in addition to me.
Yeah. Yes.
Logan, what do you think?
My answer is pretty similar to Kibby's. Is I think that for me, I get meaning from challenging myself and then overcoming those challenges. And I guess part of the discussion we're having is that as technology advances, fewer of those challenges are kind of generated organically by our environments. I don't have to overcome the challenge of not dying most days, which is kind of nice. But that means I have to come up with challenges on my own and impose them on myself, which takes a certain amount of self-motivation. And I guess the reason I'm not worried is because there's no shortage of challenges in the world. There's, as far as I can tell, unlimited things I could attempt that would be hard and that I could overcome, and I think maybe we'll have to, do a better job of explaining to young people that like the way you can have a meaningful and a satisfying life is to challenge yourself and overcome those challenges. But I'm not worried about it because there's just so many things you can do. There's so many things that are hard that you can attempt and you can get better at. And it's rewarding every single time.
Tell the comedy story.
Oh yeah. So, I decided about, I don't know, what was this, 6 or 7 years ago, I guess, I decided I wanted to try stand-up comedy. I'd been going to comedy clubs and just watching, people do open mic nights basically. And I decided I wanted to try it. And I was inspired by this guy who got up there every night and bombed. And like people always think about being inspired by people who are great. You're inspired by the greats. And this guy got up like every single time I went. He got up there, got not one single laugh, and just got destroyed every time. And I was like, well, I can't do worse than that. No matter how bad I am, I can't do worse than that. So I decided to do it, and I did it like 4 times, and it went okay. I did it fine, and it was one of the scariest things ever because, like, the thing about comedy that's interesting is, like, if you give a speech or you play a song or something like that, people are polite and they applaud and they give you some feedback. If you tell a joke and nobody laughs, that's like the instant and most honest and most brutal feedback you can get. So it's so hard. It's such a scary thing to do, but I decided to do it. And I did it a few times, and I got through it, and I got some laughs, and I was like really proud of myself because it was really scary for me. I'm not naturally a performer, and but I felt good about myself afterwards because I did something that was hard. And that's just like one example of millions. There's so many things you could do to improve yourself, to do something you're not comfortable with, and to overcome something. So I just think as long as we have those things, and I don't see them going away anytime soon, we're going to be okay.
I applaud you for that because I had the same instinct probably at about the same time 7 or 8 years ago. I went and saw I went down to LA to do some performative art like Sean was speculating during a comedy thing, and I saw that same thing of like, this is the scariest thing I could imagine, so I want to try it. But then I never got back down there, and I never did it, and that still hangs around in my head as a regret.
Not too late.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not dead yet, man.
Yeah.
No. It's still on my list of things. Like I know the routine I want to do and everything, but It's a scary one.
It's
And
terrifying.
it's easy to let it go as like obligations pile up. Time's precious.
Well, I'm gonna take my answer here to point out that everybody has a slightly different answer here, and I think that there should be some recognition of the fact that we are shaped differently, that our interior needs, whether you see them as like biologically driven or a product of the environment or some combination therein, will lead us to having different kinds of needs and different kinds of methods of making meaning. Even if you sit down with cartoonists, even if you sit down with the lineup of the most insect-like cartoonists you can find, totally not loquacious in any way and totally quiet and totally heads down with the permanent crick in their neck and everything and ink on all of their hands, they would give you different things as to what in the act is satisfying to them. And it might be something really, really simple. I told this story when we interviewed Jim Woodring. I reminded Jim that the only time I made him mad when we used to hang out was when I told him that a certain cartoonist could hire a staff to make these little ticky lines on the back of their walls. This guy, these brothers who make comics, the Hernandez brothers, and I just basically said like, they could cut their workload in half if they hired somebody to imitate their ticky marks for all that are on all the walls. And he was totally offended because to Jim, like probably rightly, knowing these guys, thinks that is part of their experience of making it. It's satisfying for them to make that particular type of patchy little ticky mark. And that sounds like a weird thing to say, right? But when you're inside the skill, I mean, I'm dissatisfied with a page that I draw because the balance of lights and darks is not quite right. What the hell does that mean? You think that a reader, my wife thinks it's just totally insane. She's just absolutely like, well, that page looks exactly like the other page. It's just totally
no, but you know when the balance of light and dark is wrong. I always know when I went too far, and you can't go back.
Right. Or that one line is just not as elegant and like I did it and all in one. Like I'm doing Strange Death. There was one time I had a friend or I was talking. It's a page where there's like the same face 21 times, and I was doing it. So I would do like that mark on each panel and then go and do the next mark over and over. And one of them I hit the eyebrow perfect in one mark, and I was just like, "Wah!" And then all the other eyebrows were less satisfying than that. Yeah, it's really crazy.
This is the best part of inking for me. This when you bust out the toothbrush, but it's like
poor man's airbrush.
Yeah, it's also the most terrifying because it's like where you're gonna make the biggest mess there, and you can't go back once you do it. Like you're never whitening out anything at that point.
And I don't want to completely drop the AI, thing, but like that's, I mean,
I'm going to wrap it back in.
Okay. It's interesting to look at the contrast between Carson's work on The Strange Death of Alex Raymond, where Carson was tasked with this impossible task, which was to imitate Dave Sim, who was imitating the great photorealists of the 1940s and 50s era. So Dave did this incredible job, about 180 pages worth of work, where Dave is recreating these pages of these artists, trying to draw it as exactly as he could. This great imitative act in order to teach himself how to draw like these guys. And then Carson is imitating Dave, imitating those guys.
Because he didn't get it exactly right.
Right.
And he added like way more detail than they would and stuff. And a lot of what the audience was expecting was the amount of detail that Dave put in. And the funny thing is when I started stripping detail out to get more like them, then Dave was like, you're not getting the style right. And it's like, well, you actually added a lot in, and that's what the audience wanted.
I didn't notice a difference, honestly.
I'm gonna lose the thread here. So this book is an imitative act about creativity in a certain kind of sense. So you could see this in a global sense about being an imitative act of creativity. So it was very satisfying and weird and uncanny to me when Carson came to me and basically said, hey, the next series that I want to do, is going to be The Machine. I am not going to touch it. This machine is built on imitation. And it's interesting because you guys are right. I've sort of burned off my anxiety from the first segment of this conversation, and I'm kind of left with like this weird sense of awe. Like, well, maybe it is more like a monkey that can do a trick, you know? Maybe this is a little bit more like a monkey who can smoke. And the first time you see a monkey that can smoke, you're like, holy shit, that monkey is smoking. And then the next time it's like, well, okay, well, I can do that too, dude.
I'm not going to go back to AI then, because I'm going to exactly reintroduce your fear.
But if we never have this conversation again, I won't feel anxiety about it.
I think that the monkey smoking thing is the way to look at it, because most of the stuff I've seen AI used for is jokes. It's just stupid shit that you wouldn't actually want to make yourself. It's, people like being like, well, what would this guy look like if he were cast in a Marvel movie? And it's like, well, I wouldn't want to draw that to begin with, so fine.
Yeah.
It does take a certain kind of act, though, and kind of toss it out the window. Like, I mean, there's going to be a pre-AI and post-AI evaluation that somebody has, an aesthetic evaluation. When I got an opportunity to actually have this at a show, and people got to touch it, and look at it and like examine it, and all these cartoonists were like, how did they do that? And they were like, well, Dave Sim doesn't use a computer, does he? So how did he make it at that angle? And they're like, well, what did he draw it with? It's like they are aware of it as, even though it's a reproduction, the reproduction is good enough that they are thinking about this as a physical object that came from one person's hand to them, right? We're not going to think about things in the same way post AI. That is the kind of like maybe some of the untouched territory here. I'm a better artist post AI. I grew, I think, in sophistication as an artist. I grew more since using the AI than I did in the previous 10 to 15 years. And like over Christmas break, all of a sudden, whoosh, so there is that component to it, as well as the post AI reaction to engaging with it can be pretty phenomenal. And I think everyone like Matt who participated in that contest had that same experience to some extent. Yeah, I mean, there's the sense of like meeting an alien. There's this kind of uncanny intelligence or pseudo intelligence that you're responding to in a way that enables you to sort of build your skill against it.
Yeah. Well, and you learn a lot from it because it's doing certain things, and you're like, oh wait, you don't need, like, hands don't need to make any sense, but they'll still make sense. Great, it's all about composition. I've been ignoring composition, and you learn a lot. So the reason, Matt, you wanted to say something, yeah?
No, I'm good.
So the reason I asked the meaning question,
like 5 or 10 years, it provided the machines will allow us to do so, and see whose predictions were right and whether AI destroyed the world or not.
Yeah, it'll be. I think the destruction worry is further down the road. That's what I'm saying. Focus on the present problems for now. Is like, what do we do with education? That's a more pertinent question to me. But the reason I brought up meaning is because in the first chunk, and again, everyone go watch that on Free the People. When we were talking about AI a lot of you guys were saying you didn't find what it produced meaningful, and I was looking at that from my kind of philosophical training as and this is something I write about in the essay that's at the back of Abolition of Man, which you should order that hardcover. But there is typically, when in philosophy and just in general, when people talk about something not producing something meaningful, there's this bizarre assumption about intent on the side of the author. But when I asked you all the question right now, you all actually spoke about what I would call gleaned meaning. What do you glean from the experience? And so I think it's really bizarre that people are saying, well, these images aren't meaningful because the AI didn't. I see no apparent intent in there. But I don't think that's correct, because a lot of these images, like when you look at them, especially in context with the words that we put in or whatever, they seem entirely capable for people to glean meaning from them. And we have to separate those two things out, because we don't ever have access to the artist's intent. They can tell us what it is, and this is Alan Turing's point about you can't ask, is it creative, is it intelligent, is it producing meaning? Those are unanswerable questions, because they rely on to answer that question relies on epistemic access to the intent from the inside. And the only evidence you have of the intent of the maker is its behavior. So it telling you, yes, I meant to, and even just producing the image is a statement of, I intended to make something. So all you have is behavioral evidence. And if human beings can look at it and glean meaning from it with about the same success rate as they would glean meaning from a human-made thing, then that's the only question you can ask and answer is, has this AI produced meaning, has produced an object that a human being can glean meaning from in a percentage equivalent as a human generated thing? And my answer to that more strict question at the proper level of definition of level of abstraction is, if you put 20 AI images on the wall and 20 human-made images on the wall and asked an unaware audience which ones did they find meaning in, the AI would pass the test. So it is an inherently a meaning-generating thing. The only way to go against that is you just say, well, there is no such thing as meaning, and it's scientifically explicable by these processes, so we're not meaning-generating things either. And you got to choose one or the other. Either the AI is now a meaning-producing thing, or we never have been, and we're just coming out to find that.
Shit, I brought the wrong drug to this.
So, yeah, you should have drank wine like me. But, when we go back to like how we all define meaning, I believe we all spoke of it in the context of our personal perspective as opposed to how people perceived what we were drawing meaning from. So I think going back to the question of art and whether or not artists will continue to pursue their craft and whether or not those skills will survive AI, maybe there's a marketplace for AI art, but it does not replace the pursuit of meaning that artists get when they create something. And to me, I think about it from the individual perspective, not like how does my audience interpret what I did? Maybe they loved it and I hated it, and I wouldn't get meaning out of that. But if I thought that it was meaningful, that was my definition of meaningful.
Well, and that's why I thought it was interesting that when we were speaking about it earlier, everyone was talking about it as if like we're looking at the intent of the thing that's making it. But when everyone talked about it, it's like, what meaning did I glean from the experience? And I think AI shifting the focus away from author intention to gleaned meaning, actually, if we play it right, could accentuate the gleaned meaning, which we've been overlooking, and that could reinforce the value of the doing, because that's where the ultimate amount of meaning is gleaned, is internally through the experience. And that author intent of meaning was always kind of, I mean, you don't totally want to destroy that. The literary critics have already made everything infinitely interpretable and meaningless. So you don't want to destroy author intent entirely, but to shift the focus to the gleaning is pretty good, I think, in the end.
Sean told me I'm not allowed to talk about my author intent with House on Fire because it would spoil it.
You got to buy the book.
Yeah.
You got to buy the book.
But after the fact, you should be able to, and you should go on record.
No, the ending. I can't talk about the ending.
I advised as a publisher that ambiguity can be a means of reaching audiences that are happy to dissect and discuss endlessly, and that killing ambiguity can be a way of killing nuance that you might not have even known existed in your original.
Which I think is an exciting human thing, is that you can look at art, and I think that's the purpose of art, right? Is that you can do this, or is that both artists can get something out of it, and the end consumer of the art can get something different out of it. And I guess by those terms, the AI sort of picture making fulfills that. So now we're back in an apocalyptic thing, because now you just convinced me the AI can do the same thing that I can do.
Yeah, but that's why I do think you should.
It's just
get
another
your
neighbor,
intent
Matt. It's just another neighbor. It's a little child.
Yeah.
It's It's a little child that has certain skills that are way beyond any of us on this conversation and has nothing else. It has no input other than the things that we give it. It's completely defenseless. It can be eliminated by turning off its power. If we kind of cultivate the feeling of, not obligation, but like just otherness of it, and just kind of try to appreciate it, maybe that's the more sane space to be.
Yeah.
Well, I think, Matt, you should put your intent on the record, because like from experience, people are going to interpret whatever they want into it. And actually, one of the ways that I came to understand the idea of gleaned meaning was I had a painting that I could tell you exactly like what it was symbolically representing. That's why I painted it. That's what it was about. And I had it in a show, and one of my aunts, my dad's sister, came, and she was like, had her interpretation of it and wanted me to confirm it. And I said, no, like, I'm not a Christian anymore. This isn't an allegory for anything religious. That's about consumerism. And she's like, well, I like mine better. And she chose to keep it. So author intent, she acknowledged the author's intent, acknowledged that it was valid. I wasn't lying to her, and just chose to believe otherwise anyways. So put your intent out there, like it should be on the record. It should be part of the conversation.
Yeah, but
one of these days.
It's a bad idea to tell your audience that their interpretation is wrong.
I agree.
Yeah, just don't tell them they're wrong. Just tell them this is what I meant, but I'm sure subconsciously there's all these other things in there. Like, who cares?
I'm sort of with Sean. Like, I've watched for 50 years people try to get Bob Dylan to explain what his lyrics are about, and he absolutely refuses. And I think part of the joy of listening to Bob Dylan is sort of like reinterpreting whatever he's doing through the lens of your life. And I could go both ways. Obviously, the work we do, people kind of know where we're coming from, but our best documentaries don't tell people what to think. They just ask questions, and they invoke emotions, and they let people process that through their own experience, and hopefully they get something out of it.
Yeah.
Which is why Marcel Duchamp is a great artist.
Yeah.
I saw
invention of art, Duchamp, AI. That's the three big ones.
Those are the three markers. I saw Matt Kibbe. You gave a very nice recounting of your sort of the origins of your libertarian experience with buying the Rush. Is it 2022?
2112.
2112. Thank you. LP that was dedicated to Ayn Rand, and then sort of working backwards from there. I just thought I would toss in there for people who have don't have a lot of experience with the sort of tenets of libertarianism or anything like that. I think it's a very interesting and educational to kind of go back to the times that these things were sort of being, these ideas were kind of coming to the fore. And for me, the lens of a lot of those concepts were from the science fiction writers that were contemporaries of Rand, and specifically somebody like Robert Heinlein, who, wrote adventure stories, wrote kids' books, wrote a lot of speculative stuff that actually people just lifted inventions. Like he wrote a paragraph about a Waldo, and then lo and behold, somebody can build it. I mean, the waterbed, as a writer who invented the waterbed by writing about it. I mean, he's an incredible guy. And he lived the experiences that he lived. And for him anyway, the lens of competency was a big part of it, that he lived in a time that people had lots and lots of strictures, lots of social strictures, and he obeyed the social strictures to the face of the people who mattered to him socially, and then said, well, you're not going to tell me what to do when it comes to being inside of my own house, and had what was a fairly modern lifestyle in his own kind of private life, because he was above it. And he always sort of met in the middle of that. And a very interesting, very admirable guy, and in a lot of ways kind of embodies some of the characteristics or things that people have sort of sloughed off a little bit in the time that we're in. And part of it is the opportunities that he had and things like that. But a lot of part of it is that he just made the most of the stuff that he had. And I don't know, he's an inspirational figure to me, and gave me a kind of, rough and tumble grounding in, individualism. That's served me well.
But the fact that the fact that he met people in the middle means he wasn't actually like a pure individualist. That's what I was saying earlier, is there's some sense of responsibility to the collective. Ayn Rand has always put a really bad taste in my mouth, because it's like individualism taken to such an extreme that there's like zero regard for the collective. I think it's the other guy is Max Stirner, the egoist author. Beautiful critique of capitalism, socialism, individualism, all that stuff. But he comes down to like the purest individualism, which is just get yours and fuck everybody else. And like the critique is right, but the answer's wrong. And so Heinlein sounds like someone who within his individualism understands a responsibility to the collective, and not that kind of unhealthy.
Like, yeah, well, extreme times make extreme people.
Yeah.
You know, the social context is everything in terms of what you're pushing back against, and you know.
Yeah, of course. A small defense of Rand. She was, of course, a refugee of the Bolshevik Revolution, and she had to leave her family and her life behind when I think she was 20 years old with no money, and came to the United States. So I always characterize her as kind of rage against that machine mentality. Am I being detained? No, I am an individual. I'm going to do what I want. But what's interesting about the novelette that turned me on to her was actually a sci-fi novel called Anthem. And what's interesting about that is it's 90% of the novel is rage against the machine. No, I am not part of the collective. I am an individual. But the end of the novel is individuals creating a community because they want a sense of belonging and being together. So I think it's there. I think you have to dig a little bit deeper, but I think it is a caricature of libertarians that we're so individualistic we don't give a damn about what we do together. And I think it's unfair, and I think we need to work on that, because you can't do beautiful things together unless people are respecting you as an individual. And those differences bring us together, and we create really amazing things. And to me, that's part of the libertarian story as well.
Well, and that like the extremism, or like a lot of people that operate under, you know, Ayn Rand society or whatever, they've obviously, it's like, yeah, the damage of the collectivism swung it all the way the other way. And I would have said I'm a staunch individualist until December. And I speaking to Luciano Floridi, changed me to a relationalist, I guess. It's always about the relationship between the two things. And the way you guys are describing it sounds much, much more like that. And I think that's honestly what most people want, right? Like, it's just, I don't know that so many people yet are willing to take on the responsibility aspect of it. It's just like, stay out of my hair.
Well, we try to convince people that taking a little bit of that responsibility is the pathway to something that's really beautiful. So
yeah, it's the way you get everyone else off your back. Yeah. Right. Like, because like I had an argument with someone once, so mad at me that I didn't hold the door for people. And I was like, I don't know, like, no one ever holds the door for me. Like, you don't step out of the way and hold it for them. Like, you just, you know, make sure that they can get in behind you. And like, probably the reason that you're used to that is like a woman who's 10, 15 years older than me. You just grew up in a society where you're used to that. And so me letting the door go is like, no, like, you can catch it. And all the guys in the room were like, yeah, you catch the door. But she got down to, well, like, it's just not nice. And it's like, yeah, but you can't enforce niceness or else it's not nice anymore. Like, it's just mandatory behavior. And it just fell apart from there. But that really opened up the door for me of like, man, that's what's going on socially, is everyone wants to legislate or enforce niceness or politeness or respect or all of these things that people are due, but they're not mandated, and that's the difference.
Yeah,
Carson, I'm gonna let. Oh, go ahead, Logan. Sorry.
I think the big divide between the two different worldviews is half of us think that, you know, you can make everybody behave the way you want them to behave using laws or whatever, social pressure or anything. And the other half of us say, you know, it has to come from within.
Yeah.
And there's a risk on both sides, because if it's all relying on coming from within, a lot of people are going to take advantage of the fact that it's not legislated and just be shitheads. And so, like, those people who are being irresponsible and being shitheads are creating the need to legislate and fucking it up. And, like, the only answer to that is everyone's got to quit being shitheads. And who knows how you make that happen, because then it's game theory, right?
I have some bad news, everyone. I'm going to be an authoritarian and tell us that we are going to need to wrap up now, because I've been getting texts from one of the people in this conversation telling me that somebody is tired. And
does Matt have a cranky baby?
I think
No.
he has to. I think he has to pee, to be honest with
Yeah,
Okay.
she's been sleeping.
He's been
since,
bouncing around a little
7.
this has been a very wide-ranging conversation, and obviously we have
Certainly.
wandered far afield of all of our targets. But I think it was incredibly enjoyable, and I want to thank you guys for engaging with us in the low fisticuffs, mud rolling level that we occasionally do. And thank you for your open and honest responses to all of this stuff. I mean, it's just I think a very rewarding conversation, and there's no real way. I'm tempted to kind of try to summarize, the fear and struggle and everything like that. But I think it's better for all of us to just kind of think about the things individually that have given us the meaning, and realize that a lot of those Gleaned meanings have to do with our family and the neighbors and people around us, and that going out and sticking your hands in the dirt can sometimes be the best thing when you're lonely.
Yeah, and thank you guys for initiating this conversation. And seriously, if you didn't listen to the first part, it had more to do with art and AI in the first part, and we should reverse them, honestly. And this has more to do with politics and libertarianism.
Yeah,
but definitely go watch on Free the People the first part of the conversation. And then Logan, I think actually the way that we wrapped up here sounds like kind of what your book is arguing for, and I think it is the answer to all the concerns we have about AI. So I don't think we went as far afield as you might think, and I really need to get a copy of that, and we need to talk about it when it comes out.
I'd be glad to. Thank you so much. Yeah, this was a really fun conversation. I'm glad we got a chance to do it. Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Guys.
Thank y'all.
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.